All right, hello everyone, and welcome back to the Forge of Freedom podcast. I am here with a guest that I'm excited to be chatting with today, Stephanie Hetherton. She's the regional director for the Tuttle Twins book series. Stephanie, welcome to the Forge of Freedom.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, and welcome to the NRA annual meeting.
Thank you.
Yeah, maybe we can get this part out of the way
Yeah.
to begin with. What is the Tuttle Twins book series doing at the NRA annual meeting?
Well, really the tenets that we focus on with the Tuttle Twins are about the principles of liberty and about personal responsibility and understanding civics and government in a way that we can apply it to our lives. And so we have a lot of homeschoolers that love Tuttle Twins, but it's not just homeschoolers that need it. Everybody needs to understand these principles, because if we do, we can all work as a team to build the kind of America that we want to have and preserve our liberties.
Yeah, exactly. And I should back up a little bit. I should ask this question first, probably. First of all, tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got involved with the Tuttle Twins, and what the Tuttle Twins is today, because the Tuttle Twins started out as a book series, but it's not just a book series today.
Right. Yeah, it has quite a story. It's grown just like a family, My background is in government and public policy and history. And so with those things in mind, when I learned about the Tuttle Twins, I told my mom, and this was years ago, I said, this is what you need to get my daughter for Christmas, because it's something that we'll use. It's something that will not sit there and get dusty, and that I will sit there and wish didn't make noise. So, and it's served us well, because not only has my daughter read them, and several times at that, but my sons have read them too. And so now it's something we can all discuss together. And I appreciate the fact that now that my daughter's 13, she is able to make these connections between modern day events and the things that are talked about in the Tuttle Twins books. So something will come on the news and she'll go, Mom, it's just like in that Tuttle Twins book.
Yeah.
And either they applied this and this is why this is working, or they didn't do this and that's why they're having problems. And I'm not having to force those conversations. It is something that she's organically picked up from these books and mentally has been able to connect. And so when this position came available last year, when they were starting more growth with outreach, I'm the Southeast regional exhibit manager. And so I'm all over the Southeast at different events. And so when the NRA was going to be here, it fell in my region this year. So that was how I ended up at this specific event, which I'm happy about. My husband was really thrilled about too.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mentioned pre-recording here that my wife was also excited about the Tuttle Twins being here and the fact that we were going to have this conversation. So no pressure, but my wife is probably watching us right now. And speaking of that, we have a 16-month-old son. We have the book that's meant for the series actually that's meant for toddlers, and we enjoy those. But the book series really spans not only for toddlers, but also goes through older children, and is really a good resource even for adults. Can you talk a little bit about sort of the target audience?
Definitely. And it's grown. It started off with the original series that was meant for elementary school children and beyond, where it's what I call the Cliff Notes versions of a lot of larger or more complex works. And so it breaks it down in a fun way where the twins are having adventures, learning about these different parts of public policy, government, life lessons. And the kids, when they read these books, are able to just absorb the information, kind of like I was saying before with my daughter. And it's not forced in any way. And so it's branched since then into the toddler books, which are fantastic. And it gives them that vocabulary to work with, so that as they're learning these concepts, it's not new, it's not overwhelming. They've heard those terms before. And so then they get into the original series books. And then we have the guidebooks, which are for ages 10 and above, that help develop logical thinking skills. And my favorite book in that one is The True Conspiracies, where it talks about things that people used to wonder about that have been proven true, and it's all documented. And then from there, they have the teenage books that are called Choose Your Consequences. And with those, if you ever did those Choose Your Own Adventure series, when you're younger, you're reading those, where you go to this page if you choose this, or this page. That's what the Choose Your Consequence series does. But it uses these principles. So you see, if you have a socialistic mindset and this is what you choose, this is your outcome. If you're choosing liberty, then this is your outcome. So it gives teenagers that real-time decision-making sense where they can pick up those lessons.
Yeah.
And it's expanded now beyond that to, we have a history curriculum, an economics curriculum that's ages, right now it's broken down 5 to 17. And so you can do it with the whole family. And then we also have the online academy that has launched. And we have vetted teachers that are speaking about these different areas of economics, decision-making, history, finances, all from a non-woke perspective. So you're not having to worry about what they're throwing in there, along with the information you want your kids to learn.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, fantastic. Well,
Yeah.
I'll tell a quick story. A friend of ours is actually a friend of my father's initially. They were in law practice together. We're still friends, yes. Aaron Sperling, he's been on the podcast before. If he's watching, I'll give him credit. He gave me a book when I was quite young. I don't remember exactly how old, 7 or 8 years old. It was The Adventures of Jonathan Gullible by Ken School. I don't know if you're familiar with this book, but it was a free market odyssey. And it's a book styled a lot like sort of the original series of the Tuttle Twins. It's basically a story, like a fictional book, that teaches you different concepts about economics and law and history that sort of simplify things that sound complicated.
Right.
And that's really how the Tuttle Twins got started, right? It is putting these somewhat complex ideas into simple, easy to consume stories that help a child or even an adult internalize those lessons.
Right.
Is that a good way to describe it?
That's a great way to describe it, because Connor Boyack, the author, he works in the field of public policy, and his kids would ask him, "Dad, what do you do?" He was trying to explain it to them, and he ended up developing the Tuttle Twins as a way to break it down in a fun way so that they could understand, this is what Dad does, this is what we stand for. And other people have just latched on to that because it's such a beautiful way. I think Connor's brilliant the way he set it all up, because it makes it to where even adults can read the children's series and get something out of it. I call them, like I said, the Cliff Notes versions, because you can sit down 20 minutes and have an idea what that classic work is about, what this concept means, and not have to labor over a lot of legalese and, have a lot of brain wrestling with it.
Right. And these are ideas, by the way, that fill in the gaps that most people have when they graduate from a government school in particular, right?
Yeah.
I mean, these are ideas that you've probably never heard of unless you sought these ideas out on your own,
Right.
From a traditional government education.
True.
So they're a fantastic resource, whether you're a homeschool family, you're doing some sort of alternative education, or you just want something to augment the government provided education that your child might be receiving.
Yes.
Right.
That's very true.
Yeah. And the other thing that I think I saw recently, and I know the Tuttle Twins has been working on it for quite some time, is a video series, animated cartoon type. You might have talked a little bit about
we've
that.
partnered with Angel Studios.
Okay.
And so they've created the animated version of the Tuttle Twins, and they have adventures with Grandma Gabby, and she has this motor scooter that time travels. And so they get to go back in time or to other locations throughout the world and meet people who are experiencing something related to the topic. So they meet a lot of historical characters that either did or didn't apply these principles, and you see what outcome that we have gotten from that. And so it gives that real life scenario. And so it's not just an abstract idea. It has a real life application that you can.
Yeah. And you mentioned Connor Boyack. Another person who's contributed greatly, I know, to the Tuttle Twins series is Elijah Stanfield.
Yes.
Right? He was the illustrator for most, if not all, of the books, and did a fantastic job. I know illustrating these books helps to bring the stories in these books and the lessons in the books to life. He, as a matter of fact, he wrote a foreword for a book called Kids Don't Need School. And I think it's a great book as well. I'll plug that. It's written by Jonathan and Adriana Prescott. It's a great resource for those of you interested in homeschooling. But he actually wrote the foreword to that. I think did a fantastic job. So he's a skilled illustrator and also a skilled writer. And I know that it's not just a one-man show, right?
No, the teamwork between the two has really made it, because I think one thing that's made it so successful are the illustrations that come along with this, and the ideas that Elijah has been brought to life because the kids, as they're reading these books, they see these pictures, and if you have more of a visual learner, they can see what's going on, especially the history books. They have timelines in there. They have maps that have been drawn. You get to see these things brought into a more 3D perspective. So,
yeah. And I love these. I love history. I love economics. You've got a book there called The Law, which is, as you mentioned, basically a condensed version of Frederick Bastiat's The Law. And I think that the concepts in there are things like, how the fiat money system was created, the creature from Jekyll Island, about the Federal Reserve, and things about, for instance, the seen and the unseen, and the invisible hand of the market, and the merits of free trade, and all sorts of things that you really just don't get any exposure to unless you seek out these ideas on your own. Right. Why is it so important, from your perspective, to teach these ideas so early? Because a lot of people might be listening to this conversation thinking, well, why does my child need to know about the law, or the seen versus the unseen, or the Federal Reserve? What's the idea behind introducing these ideas so early?
Right. I think that one thing to keep in mind is that children are sponges, and when they're younger, it's so much easier for them to memorize. It's so much easier for them to they grasp more than they can give back to you, right? So they can't always relay back everything that they are internalizing. But I feel like if you take, say, the toddler books, and you start with that, and it's the ABCs and the 1, 2, 3s of these different principles, then you give them those pegs to hang the knowledge on, because you've got the vocabulary in place. And then when they see these big words, it doesn't faze them. They're already familiar with it. And so if you start with that foundation, and then you add the concepts from the older books, and then you continue on with building that logical thinking and critical assessments that they can make on their own, and then you get into decision making with the teen books, it just progresses very naturally. And it's funny, because I was just talking to one of the professors from Hillsdale College that's here, and you're going to have a guest from Hillsdale tomorrow. And he was saying how much easier it is when kids have been given that foundation to build the knowledge they need in college from a correct viewpoint, because you're not having to dismantle. And it's always easier when you're building anything to start with a strong foundation and to build up, rather than having to build apart, like take apart and put back together. So,
and it's really, we talked about personal responsibility, right? It's about taking responsibility for your child's mind, for cultivating their view of the world, virtues, the character, and the sorts of ideas that you want to instill in them. And I think that, as you said, it's much easier to build the proper foundation first, rather than sending your child away to somebody else and then having to deconstruct those things later. And I mentioned earlier the book from Ken Schooland, The Adventures of Jonathan Gullible, and it I think represents exactly what you're saying in my life. I read it well before the Tuttle Twins came out, and I didn't realize it at the time that I read it, when I was 7 or 8 years old, that I didn't really understand all of the concepts in the book, but it was there in the back of my mind, and it gave a place for these sorts of concepts to really take hold later in life, when I was encountering these ideas in actual textbooks, and not just in the story form. So I think that's partly where I see huge value in these books, is that it does create that foundation, and it gives a place for these more complex articulation of these ideas to rest later in life. So one of the things we talked about, why is the Tuttle Twins here at the NRA annual meeting, right? And you mentioned pre-recording that you go to a homeschool conference and everybody knows who you are. Here it's a little bit different.
It is.
Right? But I assume, and I want you to expand on this a little bit, I assume you're trying to reach a broader audience. You're trying to take the Tuttle Twins more mainstream, and really, push these ideas in a way that helps reach more children nationwide, so that we do have children who are brought up with this foundational knowledge.
Right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. I believe that homeschoolers latch on to these materials because these are a lot of the reasons that they're homeschooling, is because this is what they want their kids to learn about and to have from the beginning. But everybody needs to understand this because it takes a team, right? We all have to be working together. And so no matter your education, no matter where you are, understanding these things is only going to help everybody out.
Mm.
And so I want my kids to grow up with a big host of coworkers in this idea of preserving liberty. And so the more who know about it, the better off all of us will be.
Yeah. And I love, and part of the reason I invited you to the show is because the Forge of Freedom, the idea behind the name is that liberty, that freedom is preserved and created from the bottom up.
Yeah.
That it doesn't come from the government. It doesn't come from some higher authority other than God. Mm-hmm. And that for future generations to enjoy the fruits of liberty, they have to understand the ideas first, right, and then work within their own lives and their own families and their own communities to and spread those ideas and to instill those through their action in their community. So right, I think that the Tuttle Twins is a great resource for that purpose, and I think fits so closely with the idea behind the Forge of Freedom. So that was partly why I was excited to have you on. Now, one thing, I want to get into this a little bit. So we're at the NRA annual meeting, which is a diverse audience in its own right. Yeah. There are lots of people here for hunting, some for self-defense, some for competition and shooting sports, others for other reasons maybe. But how do these things go hand in hand? And we talked a little bit about this pre-recording. Mm-hmm. We talked about the importance of an armed society, right? How does equipping children and adults with these ideas augment or supplement, that spirit of an armed society?
Yeah. Well, when you understand what your rights are, you understand what liberties we've been given, what things are inherent, what is not given to you by the government, and what we need to protect. I think that you can start with sharing that knowledge. And when you have that base of knowledge, then a lot of times it doesn't become a battle with weapons. You can just engage on the mental level. And sometimes you can even help persuade other people to understand why these things are important. And so you want to have the weapons to be able to defend yourself if you need to, and for hunting and providing. But at the same time, you don't want to have to use them in an unpleasant way. And so if you are equipped with understanding your rights, your liberties, and the basis of all of that, then you don't have to resort to the weapons, so that they become a second mm-hmm. line of defense versus the first.
Right. Yeah. I like the way you articulated that. And you may be familiar with this quote. I think Ron Paul used it a fair amount, that an idea whose time has come can't be stopped by any army or any government. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's especially true if you have an army of people equipped with these ideas, right? Who are able not only to understand them, as you were talking about in the context of children, but to articulate them. Yes. And to communicate effectively and convince other people that these ideas are ideas that have value, right, and that voluntary cooperation and peace and free markets and liberty are really the key to a peaceful and prosperous society.
Right.
And so, like you said, to the extent that there are enough people to articulate and spread those ideas, we don't have to resort to the firearm, hopefully, right? So right. The Second Amendment is second behind the first for a reason, right? And I think that these two go hand in hand, and I'm happy to see that the Tuttle Twins is here for that reason. Mm-hmm. So, you mentioned you've gone to lots of conferences, right? Is this the first time at the NRA annual meeting? Okay. What has been surprising? What has been different than you expected? What's been the same as you expected? What's your experience so far?
Well, it's been a varied experience, really. I'm not surprised by what's sold the most, and that's been our toddler series because it's so foundational. And a lot of grandparents getting them for grandkids, a lot of young families buying them so they can start from the ground up. And so that part has not been surprising to me. It has been interesting to see the range of people that are interested. How many people have come up and said, I've heard about Tuttle Twins, but what are you really? What do you have to offer? And how surprised people have been at how much we do have now. Even people who were familiar with Tuttle Twins before are coming and seeing the wide range of things, including the curriculum that they were not aware was available. So it's been fun to see the light bulbs go off as people are seeing what is there, and it gives parents and grandparents and other caregivers that confidence that there are tools there to help support them in what they're doing with their families.
What challenges have you encountered in introducing this product and these ideas to new audiences?
Ooh, it depends on the audience, really.
Yeah. Well, let's stick with the NRA annual meeting. What challenges have you faced here?
I think really it's been trying to help people understand. Just trying to help them understand sometimes the importance of getting that head knowledge as well. And some people do understand that, but helping them understand that the younger you do that, the better off that we all are, like we talked about.
Yeah.
Trying to work foundationally on that. And I think, too, it surprised a lot of people, the Tuttle Twins being here. We're not expecting that.
Mm-hmm.
It's not. We haven't been to the NRA before, so this is introductory to them. And so it's giving a lot of food for thought.
Yeah. Good. So what, I know we've talked about the books, we've talked about the online academy. Where's the best place for people to go to find out more information about the Tuttle Twins?
Well, our website's TuttleTwins.com. You can find all of our resources there. We have online specials that run from time to time. And then the regional managers like myself, when we're at events, we have on-site specials that are better than the online prices and give you free shipping on orders over a certain amount. So you can be assured that you're getting the best deal when you're at an in-person event. So that's why one reason we're trying to go to more events, to give that option to people.
Okay, great. And I've put up the website here on the screen so that people can see who are watching on Facebook and YouTube. It's TuttleTwins.com, and from there, there's obviously you can see the products page. There's a drop-down menu there, the Academy. There's also a great newsletter that I think is worthwhile subscribing to, and obviously on various social media. Tuttle Twins is active on social media as well, right?
Right.
Is that through? I know Connor Boyack is active on X, for instance. Are you on other social media?
Tuttle Twins is particularly active on Instagram.
Okay.
We're posting about different resources. We post our different events are in the stories. So even about the NRA convention is in the stories, so that people know where to find us. And if they're in the area, they can hopefully pop over and take advantage of the deals that are here.
Okay. Now, one thing I want to clarify, we talked about the books and how a lot of these books are stories, but you also have separately curriculum type packages. Can you talk a little bit about what sorts of curriculum is available through the Tuttle Twins?
Sure. We have a history curriculum. It starts in 1215, and it's about the history of America. And so that puzzles some people. Why are you starting in 1215? We weren't even around yet. But when you understand how the stage was set, it helps you understand why the founding of America was so important and vital and different than other countries. And it starts with all these trade routes and how things were introduced into new areas, and that brought about new ideas, that brought about new skill sets, and people were having to start making choices that they didn't have before. And all of this set in motion the founding of America. And so we have books 1 and 2. Book 1 goes all the way to 1776.
You want to hold those up on the camera here so people can see what you're referring to?
So this is book 1. It goes from 1215 to 1776. And obviously, that's a span of time that it's a lot here in this one book. But they have, the great thing about it is there's little more about different people here, little bios about them. Like this one's about Marco Polo, and so that way you can learn more about who's featured in that particular chapter of the book. You have maps so that you can visually see where they're talking about. There's also in here, so more bios. There's timeline too, so that you can get an idea of where in the world other things were going on at the same time, so that when you have that big picture view, you can, it just helps you to piece it together, because I feel like history a lot of time gets segmented. And when you do that, you don't see the cohesive nature of history. So that's book one. Book two is 1776 to 1791, because there was a lot going on in America at that time. And so, again, it's the same kind of format. And Connor has a let's talk about this section. And they don't shy away from the hard things either. They'll talk about things we've done right as a country, things we have not done. There's not excuses made. But, he also brings up that you have to understand in the context of history that they didn't know all the things we know now. And their situations and surroundings were different. And so with a different mindset, you have to give them some grace, too, for decisions that were made that we don't agree with now. 100 years from now, what are people going to critique us about? And we can't defend ourselves anymore because we're not here. Sure. So if you see history that way, that helps. Volume 3 in this is going to go up through the Civil War. Okay. And that's going to come out in 2026. So we're all really excited about that one as well. So that's our history curriculum. And then we have an economics curriculum. I didn't bring a copy of that over here, but it's I'll put that up on the screen. Yes, there you go. Yeah. It's called the core curriculum, and it's 3 books. You can get it as an ebook, which is what I recommend, because it does have some hyperlinks in it to additional resources. Okay. And it's really great because that's the one where they break it down to 5 to 11 or 12 to 17, so that you can read the same information and then have your kids, based on their age, do the appropriate activities. So it's really fantastic. Yeah.
And it comes up, I'm showing here on the screen, it also comes with parent guides, right? So, yeah. For people who are parents who might be intimidated about teaching economics to their child, right? The Tuttle Twins has really created a package here that makes it possible for people to do that.
Yes. And with a lot of our books, we provide parent guides or workbooks that are links or PDFs that they can print and use at their discretion. Just because our whole goal is to support the family, because really, if they're getting this stuff at the family level, that's where you're going to have the most impact.
Yeah. What speaking of that, what is your primary audience? Is it mostly homeschool families, or do you have a lot of alternative school, like charter school type, or do you get a lot of people who just want something to supplement their child's education at a public school?
Yeah, it's a mixed audience, but the main group would be homeschoolers at this point. Then again, it was introduced to homeschoolers first, really, because, like I said, we have a lot of those ideas are the reason that we're wanting to school our kids at home. So, and the whole goal at this point is to continue to expand that audience.
Yeah. And how long have you been with Tuttle Twins?
I started last fall. That's when we started our outreach team with the regional managers.
Okay. So you may not know the answer to this question then, but I wondered if you'd seen much difference in the sort of audience that was interested in the Tuttle Twins, especially since 2020, when the whole lockdowns and COVID and all those things occurred. Yeah. I assume that the interest in the Tuttle Twins spiked during that period.
Yes.
Do you know?
I do know some from knowing a little bit of the history that there were sales up to a certain point, and then they really skyrocketed after the pandemic, because people were starting to ask more questions than they had before, and they're not satisfied with answers that they're getting. So as people are researching and trying to gain more knowledge, then the Tuttle Twins became a leader in a lot of that information sharing, because we're not afraid to say the hard things. Sure. One of my favorite books is True Conspiracies. This is in our guidebook series, which helps promote logical, critical thinking skills. It's geared for kids 10 and up. I think it's great for adults. But what I love about this book is that it takes ideas that people had wondered about, is this true or not? And it says, here's documentation that proves, that these things
What sorts of conspiracies are in
there? So
Just a few examples.
Project MK Ultra, Operation Sea Spray, Operation Paperclip, Operation Mockingbird, Operation Popeye. I mean, they talk about cloud seeding being used.
I like the poisoned booze one. You know
Poison.
why? Because I know exactly what that's talking about. I'm a criminal defense attorney, and it's talking about prohibition
Yes.
and the poisoning of alcohol during prohibition by the government,
Right.
Which sounds like a conspiracy, but it's a true story.
Yeah.
Right. So
Truth is stranger than fiction.
Truth is stranger than fiction. Exactly. So yeah, I like that. I haven't actually read that book myself, but I'm sure it would be an interesting read, and I assume as well cited, and it includes citations to sources.
Yeah. So they have at the end we talk about what did we learn, and they give you an excerpt from government documents and other documentation that tell you exactly what's
Doesn't
going
get much
on,
better than that. Okay. There you go. All right. Well, I've got an anecdotal story that I'd like to tell. It was a few years ago at the NRA annual meeting, and my father, Mike, and I were at a seminar. They have a lot of educational seminars here that take place outside of the convention hall, and the presenter asked if there were any attorneys in the room, and we both raised our hand, and he asked, are there any criminal defense attorneys in the room? And I raised my hand, and I was the only one in there. And so we had some back and forth exchange, and so the audience sort of knew who I was because of that exchange. And after the seminar, a lady walked up to us and specifically asked my father, how did you make sure that your son was open to these ideas, was open to sorts of ideas that we care about? And she was, I think, a conservative lady. I'm libertarian myself. But that just struck me as an odd question. But I think after she asked it, my immediate thought was I was thinking about the adventures of Jonathan Gullible and the Tuttle Twins, because you can't entrust the education of your child to the government, to the state, right? You have to take some proactive responsibility for cultivating their mind, right? And I think that the Tuttle Twins, that was the first thing that came to my mind, was the book by Ken Schooland and the Tuttle Twins. And so I just wanted to, I wish in that moment that I had a bundle of Tuttle Twins books to hand to her. But nevertheless, I didn't. The Tuttle Twins wasn't here that year. So.
Yeah, we'll have to make up for that.
Can I say something?
Sure.
Yeah, because my answer was, I don't know.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
But I would say, can I say something?
Sure, yeah.
Like her question was, how do you get people to believe what you believe?
Yeah, and speaking of her child specifically, but
to me, the task is not to get somebody to believe like you believe. The task is to give them the tools and the critical thinking skills.
Right.
And you don't have to worry about them thinking like you think.
Right.
Because that's the ultimate conclusion.
Right.
Yeah. Yes.
And that leads a question I have before you finish, if you don't.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I'm about finished anyway. So, first of all, I had a few questions here at the end for the lightning round, so to speak. You mentioned the True Conspiracies book. Do you have other favorites that you would point people to?
I know everybody uses the
Or
analogy
bundles.
of
I should say you do sell books in bundles.
We do, and particularly at the conventions, that is where the savings are. We offer bundles versus the single books. Oh goodness, I don't know. I have 4 children, and each of them love the Tuttle Twins books, but they have their pockets that they prefer. I don't know. I love the original series, really. I think just because it is a quick way with me as a parent. When I was reading them to the younger children, I could read it and I'd have those light bulb moments. And the child had no idea. I was not familiar with that concept before I was reading it to them. By the end, we're both informed, and then I could go on and research further if I wanted to. So I feel like those will probably always be my standard favorite, just because they start the conversations.
Okay, gotcha. What question were you going to ask?
It's funny. I've got a book at the hotel laid out. I think it's by Ryan Holiday about Stoicism. I think that Alex gave me. And I think I'm going to substitute it for the conspiracy theory book. Now I'm going to skip that.
Yeah.
But one question I do have, in all seriousness, I talk to a lot of people that don't really, that they came through the government schools. Not a lot of people, but some people. They come through the government schools and they don't have the knowledge or the critical thinking process that you're trying to convey or train through your curriculum. And some of those people can be parents, or are parents, or will be parents. They maybe don't know what they don't know.
Right.
How do you crack that?
Well,
Because see, that may be part of the problem that we have, is that we have an older generation who doesn't have what you're trying to convey there with your work. Crack that.
I think that can go differently for different people because your personalities come into play, with how people disseminate information personally. But I think that the more people have seen the last few years how things have gone in our country and in the world, it's opened a lot of eyes to things are not always as they appear. And I think because of that, that's helped to create more of a questioning that people should have been doing all this time. But it's really easy to just kind of get complacent, and things are going okay right now. But it's when things are going okay that you need to really be arming yourself up with the knowledge and understanding these things so that when you hit the next bump in a road, you're prepared and you're ready to go. And so I think when you encounter the many people who are not familiar with this stuff, I mean, that's why I've had adults buy the basic, we call it the combo pack of the original series, because it is the Cliff Notes versions, as you will, and they can get an idea of those concepts really quickly, and that sparks interest. And then, they're ready to go on to the bigger works or to learn more from other people and supplement with additional stuff. So I think making it easy for people to grasp something and cut past the legalese that holds a lot of people up. And they don't have to have the vocabulary. I mean, at the back of these books, they will have terms that you can go over. And like at the end of, this is the law. This is the first book in the original series. They have in here where you can meet Frederick Bastiat. They talk a little bit about him. And you can get a copy of the law that he wrote. And there's a glossary of terms and discussion questions. So even if you're not familiar with those terms, this gets you going.
Yeah. But one thing I should have discussed earlier that, a lot of times people think about economics specifically or the law, and they think about case book treatises and charts and graphs, all these things. And that really is not what the Tuttle Twins is doing at all, right? Mm-hmm. They are taking the ideas in economics, applying it in a story, and the story makes it memorable, right? And so it's not like you're teaching your children charts and graphs or case law or all these. No. The ideas of liberty are more fundamental than charts and graphs.
Right.
It's about human action, and it's about it's about sort of virtue and what is right and wrong and how people should interact. And by virtue, economics is born out of that interaction. And so those stories really teach those sorts of concepts. And so, it's not, teaching your kids, how to make a graph and those sorts of things, right? So I think that people who are intimidated by teaching economics will find that these are put together in a way that makes it very accessible.
Right. Yeah. And I think as adults, we tend to overcomplicate things a lot of times. Kids have a way of being able to simplify it. We had at one of the conferences we were at, a 5-year-old came by our booth, and he was talking about, he'd read The Creature from Jekyll Island that we have. It's book 3 in this series. And he said, his mom was telling us that they were at the grocery store and their grandfather was there and talking about inflation. He goes, oh, it's the inflation monster. He just grows and grows. And he was able to explain inflation to his grandfather at 5 years old because he was equipped with the knowledge. And so I think that is key there.
Yeah, exactly. So a couple of questions just to close out. What do you think are some of the most common misconceptions about liberty that people have? Because a lot of people will say, well, yeah, I'm all for liberty, but I'm for ordered liberty. I think we have to have laws to enforce it, or I think that, we need government to make people good in some way.
Right.
What are some of the misconceptions that you've encountered about liberty?
Oh my goodness. I think people being on a pendulum, like you're basically describing, they go one side or the other instead of understanding the balance of, you need some guidelines perhaps, but you also, when you have freedom, you have liberty, there are going to be people who have the freedom to make bad choices. And sometimes that's going to affect you. but you still can't limit that liberty. There's consequences, and the consequences need to be in place for bad decisions. But at the same time, it's important to have that freedom. God's given us all a free will, and we make a lot of choices He's not happy about, but He still allows us to have that free will.
Yeah.
And I think that same with all of the people around you. They're going to make decisions that you don't like, but if you start limiting their freedoms, then yours are also going to get limited.
Yeah.
So you have to understand that balance.
Yeah. And I think that reminds me of a quote, and I may misattribute this quote. I think it was Thomas Jefferson that said he prefers the tempestuous sea of liberty to the calm seas of despotism, right? And I think that that's what people have to understand, is that liberty doesn't come without consequence,
Right.
but the fruits of liberty are worth the rougher seas of liberty, right? Maybe.
Right.
So you can have complete, maybe, I don't know, control, like a prison, but most people don't want to live in a prison, right? And so, yeah, I think that you're right, that people sort of on that pendulum or spectrum have different views about how much liberty we should have. But I think the more you're acquainted with the ideas of liberty,
Yes.
the more likely you are to fall on we should be maximizing liberty.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
So, okay, so last question. I know that working with the Tuttle Twins, your children, you said, were excited about it. I assume you were excited about it too. Has working with the Tuttle Twins given you a renewed sense of hope about the future in some way?
I think so, just because I'm seeing how many people are enthusiastic to learn these concepts, and how many people come up to us at the booths and say, oh, we love the Tuttle Twins. We've learned so much from it. And then examples like that 5-year-old who came up and started talking about inflation. And I was just like, yes, this is where it's at. And so you feel like you see so many things you don't like in the world, so many things that frustrate you about how things are going, or even how the population responds at large. But then you see those who are choosing to pursue liberty and pursue these truths, and it really brings hope to the picture. And it's like that ray of sunlight coming in. And I think it's just going to get broader and broader as more and more people embrace that.
Yeah. And that's another thing I love about the Tuttle Twins, is that there's so much negativity in the world, especially in social media and in the mainstream media. But the Tuttle Twins really conveys these concepts in a way that's very positive, gives children and the families a sense of empowerment, and I think there's a sense of confidence that comes from being so well acquainted with these concepts and ideas, that it gives them a better sense of how the world works, how they see themselves in the world as individuals, and how they interact with others. And so I think that takes a lot of the negativity, or maybe the pessimism, out of life by having that sort of positive image of who you are in the world.
Yes. And I think that because they pair the concepts of liberty and all of these civics lessons with personal responsibility, you see your own role in it as being an active participant. You are not a victim. You make choices. Things may happen to you, but you decide how you're responding to them. I mean, there's one book that's I think it's the Food Truck Fiasco one, where the kids have this booth set up, and because of other people's choices, they're negatively affected, and they're wanting to get discouraged and complain about it, but then they find a proactive way to combat that. And it really, I think it's even an example to adults, because it's real easy to sit here and say, well, man, nothing's happening right. It's not changing the way we want it to change. This isn't going the way I want it to. But we all have a role to play. And that's where sometimes the creative ideas come in, and new things happen, great things happen, because of that negative thing changed your course and made you think outside the box in a different way. So,
yeah. Well, Stephanie, I really appreciate you stopping by. One last thing, you've got a few things going on here. You've got the booth. If you would tell us which booth you're in, and then also you're going to be participating in the Youth Day tomorrow, correct?
Yes, we are. We are going to be reading one of the Tuttle Twins books at 11 and at 2 on Sunday in the youth room. And so we'll be over there for that. We are booth
2708.
Okay.
I have to get that straight. I was
Yeah.
getting it mixed up the other day.
I put you on the spot with the number, right? You know where it is, right? But
I know where we are,
There's
but-
so many here. That's booth 2708, and tomorrow at 11 for the Youth Day. If anybody is here in attendance at the NRA annual meeting or just in the Atlanta area, you can come into the meeting. I think it's a $10 fee if you're not a member of the NRA already. So certainly check out Youth Day and the Tuttle Twins booth.
Definitely.
All right. Well, thanks again, Stephanie.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was very nice to meet you and to chat with you as well.
Same.
Yeah.